I'm going to start off with an icebreaker. What fruit or vegetable describes you best?
Um, that's a good question. Definitely wouldn't be a fruit; it'd be a vegetable. Uh, and I think I'm gonna go with maybe one you wouldn't think of, bok choy, because it's got a little stiffness to it. It's got some crunch, but it's also kind of wavy and it takes on the flavor of a lot of different things that you cook it with. So I kind of think of the versatility of the vegetable when I think about myself. So yeah, I'm
Right.
gonna go bok choy.
All right. So, when did you learn you had a passion for boxing?
So boxing is literally the first sport I ever remember watching, hearing about, or even speaking with another person about. My grandfather, my mother was born in Argentina, and she moved to this country when she was about 13 years old with her parents, and we all lived in the same household. So I was very close with my Argentinian grandparents. And two things that are really important in Argentinian culture are boxing, sport, and food. So I grew up with a lot of that, as my first kind of memories is my grandmother was always cooking and my grandfather was always watching fights whenever they're on TV. So I was always kind of called into the room, sitting on his lap, watching fights, ESPN Tuesday night fights, Friday night fights, big fights on the weekends. He loved Roy Jones Jr., Mike Tyson, Oscar De La Hoya, the guys who were really big in the 90s. That's who I remember growing up watching. And my grandfather was my hero. So my hero used to watch these guys and be like, they were his hero. So he elevated these champion boxers to a level that I had him at. So for me, it was like my hero's hero. I want to be that. So that was really where I fell in love with the sport. Literally 5-6 years old. I remember watching fights with my grandfather.
And when you were going to school, was that your thought, like, I'm going to school, but I want to be a boxer?
No, because my grandfather told me never to do it. He would sit me on his lap and he would literally in the same sentence, same breath of saying, this guy is phenomenal. He's this, he's that, he's that. And then he'd go look at me and he'd see my face. And I'd be like, oh, wow. He'd be like, no, you don't do that. You're too smart. You're going to go be a doctor. You're going to go do whatever you want to be. These guys, you don't want to be like them. The sport's it's too dangerous. It's too tough. You're too smart. So I didn't grow up thinking that I was going to be a boxer until I hit my teens.
Got it. Okay. So when did you learn you had a passion for cooking?
I always had a passion for eating. So I think that's usually where people start when they fall in love with cooking. I was a little bit of a chubby kid growing up and really was I wasn't very athletic. I was kind of overweight up until about high school. So for me, food was kind of something I was always really focused on. Like I said, living with my grandparents, my grandmother was home. We were pretty much raised by my grandparents. My parents worked. And so my mother never cooked. My father didn't cook because on Long Island, it's a very expensive place to live. So they were always working. My dad's blue collar. So, they had early mornings, late nights. So I spent the majority of my time with my grandparents, and my father is Italian. So my Italian side was also big into cooking. So whenever I was with my grandparents, food was always like a central part of what we were doing. So I just grew up with both sides of my family making a big deal about food and the culture of eating and eating together. So it's just something I always grew up with.
Nice. So when did it occur to you like you wanted to combine both of these passions for it?
It happened in high school when I was wrestling. So like I said, I was kind of like a chubby kid going into high school, and then I picked up wrestling, and from cutting weight and losing weight, I finally got rid of the baby fat and became actually a very good wrestler and grew into a good athlete in my high school years. And nutrition and food was such a big part of making weight and competing as an athlete. So for me, once I finished, I was an all-state wrestler my senior year of high school. I was captain for my junior and senior year of the varsity squad. I was athlete of the year for at St. Anthony's my senior year. So for me, I was like, all right, this is something, but I need to figure out a way to do this better, because back then, I was killing myself to make weight. I wasn't eating. We would restrict water while we were training. It was very, very dumb. And I just thought there had to be a better way to do this because I feel terrible. So for me, I went right to the library. I was reading about everything I could about nutrition, about performance, about sports. And from there, I took control of my own nutrition and my own diet. And the best way to do that is to prepare your own food. So I knew exactly what was going into it. I was studying calories. I was studying macronutrients. I was studying how the body's physiology dealt with the food that you ate. But I wasn't always sure exactly what I was getting if I was buying food that was pre-made. So I took it upon myself to start to learn how to make my own food. And in the beginning, it was not a lot of chefing. It wasn't a lot of art in any way, shape, or form. It was really just kind of get in what I needed. And then it just kind of developed from there. I just took that to the next level. And I was like, if I'm going to be doing this all the time and making my own food 3-4 times a day and preparing meals in advance and for my training, maybe I can make it taste good too and make it look good.
Yeah. How did you manage to like multitask with boxing, cooking, and like other activities?
Very good question. You know, my entire kickboxing and boxing career, I was a full-time student as well. So people always ask, like, how did you find the time? You must not have ever slept. And I was like, no, that was the opposite. I slept a lot. I really didn't have a social life. I didn't do a lot of things in college that a lot of people did. I missed a lot of opportunities, a lot of social events. I focused on school and I focused on training. And then everything that wasn't related to those two things really took a back seat. So, you know, it was a sacrifice at the time from a social standpoint, but honestly, from what boxing and my school has done for me, I have been able to travel the world and meet countless people. So any of the opportunities that I might have missed during those years, I've more than made up for in terms of what I've been able to do since then.
Okay.
So missing a party it sounds like the worst thing sometimes, but it pays off later on.
Yep. We have a question in the chat. If you weren't a boxer, what other profession would you have gone into?
I'd probably be a chef, honestly. I do love to cook so much, and you know, I've been able to make this cookbook. I am working on another one as well. Never really saw myself making a cookbook, but the project kind of presented itself. But I did kind of see myself having a restaurant at some point. So that's still an option, and maybe potentially after my career. But yeah, that would probably be my other profession if it was a non-athletic profession, of course.
All right. Who was your biggest influence when it came to cooking?
I was I would have to say my Argentinian grandmother. That's my mother's mother. I was kind of saying it was going to be a toss-up between her and her husband, Carlos, because he originally taught us how to man the grill. So my grandfather, Argentinian grilling is like religion. So every Sunday during the summer, if the sun was halfway out, we were outside barbecuing by the grill with my grandfather. And and like I said, my grandfather was my hero, so I was literally attached to his hip while he did everything. And after a while, he did start to teach us. So that was the first thing I ever really got into cooking and how to prepare any kind of food. It was steaks and sausages and chicken and preparing the meat before it goes out and learning how to clean up. And then after that, I found that I really enjoyed cooking and making food for other people. So that's when I started really hanging out with my grandmother and getting her meals, and cooking was a lot more complex. So with her, I was taking down notes. I wrote down her recipes, which is why I still have a lot of them, you know, since she's passed. And yeah, that was, but I spent much more time and learned way more techniques about cooking from my grandmother than my grandfather. But yeah, those two.
Or be a part of a restaurant. Do you see yourself moving forward in the cooking industry within the next 5 years?
I do. I would like to develop more of these videos and get a YouTube channel going with my cooking, because I do enjoy the fact that I can share recipes that are not at chef level that regular people can do, but also impart some nutrition knowledge and background into the ingredients and why I'm choosing these certain things and what's it going to do in your body. I just got to finding out the time to do all that. But yeah, I do want to do that and see where that goes.
How was the fight against Manny Pacquiao?
He is an absolute legend. He is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's 43 years old now, and he's still beating undefeated world champions. The guy is absolutely incredible. One of the most famous athletes in the world. I was on a 7-city press tour with him, and we traveled all over meeting fans. And it was, he's a rock star. Everywhere we went, we were flooded with thousands of people. It's fighting a guy like that, or sharing a competitive stage with someone like that, it's an event, and it's wild. It's wild, and it's wild to see him now. Like, I'm a broadcaster now, and I do commentating for fight. I've commentated his fight since we fought, and he's just that huge of a star. And in terms of actually being in the ring with him, lightning fast, hits really hard, never gets tired. I mean, he's everything that everyone says he is.